If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
And we are back. I'm Chris Evan, the CEO of Survival Dispatch, joined tonight by my friend John Martin from the other side of the gunshine state here. It's like John and I and the rest of us, we're diehard Floridians. We love to call ourselves the gunshine state. We're not the sunshine state. It's all about guns. My good friend Randy Nance, Green Beret from back home in Texas, and Jeff MD, our in-house CIA operative, author extraordinaire, in-house 007. So before we get started tonight, we've got a conflicted question to pull up here. And if you're not familiar with the conflicted question, it's basically set in a post-apocalyptic scenario, and it's a card game of sorts. And we're going to pose this question right now. Let me make sure everybody's on stage, and hang with us till the end of the episode. All four of us will answer it when we wrap up at the end. So here's the scenario. Your scouts inform you about a small-time kidnapper who is holding people hostage and engaging in human trafficking. The initial intel is that he has a force of 4 other men with him who are well armed and dozens of victims, most of them women and children. Sounds like they would be an even match to your current survival group and your capabilities. As your group's leader, you waste supplies and risk the lives of your group members to rid the world of such characters? Or would you let them continue to prey upon the weak? So that's what's coming up at the end. We'll give you our answers at that point in time. All righty then. So we're going to do something a little bit different starting right now. Survival Dispatch. John alluded to it the other night ago, and that is that we're going to open up with a daily terrorism SITREP situation report, and then we're going to follow that up with debunking a few current fake news stories. Then we'll get into the main topic. And there's a very specific reason that I decided to do this daily terrorism SITREP. I went back and looked at all the episodes that we've done. This is episode 527 tonight. And we have basically a stable of terrorism experts. We've done a ton of episodes on terrorism. It's a daily event. If you go to this or the religionofpeace.com, there's a ticker there that shows you how many terrorist events have happened since 9/11, and it's either 45,000 or 47,000, one of the two. Put it this way, there's a lot of terrorist attacks that happen on a daily basis that don't make the legacy news. They don't hit it off on social media, and there's a couple of reasons I want to cover those sorts of topics. Most important being, typically these things that happen in other countries are a harbinger of things to come here, and it's an opportunity for us to learn from those sort of things. So, all right, here we go. So there were 2, let's call them notable terrorist incidents in the past 48 hours. So on July the 5th, Hamas engaged in an attack in Gaza that also hurt 2 U.S. aid workers. So that's the story that I have pulled up right here. And it didn't kill them, but they were attempting to kill them. So this concept of a ceasefire, that may be going on but at a high level between Israel and Iran, but it doesn't look like Hamas got the memo. Jeff, I want to come to you first. There seems to be quite a bit in the news right now on how people are actually trying to distance themselves from Hamas, meaning some of these countries in the Middle East that are, have had a history of terrorism. What are your thoughts on Hamas? Are they just going to go rogue, do you think?
Well, they need money, first of all. Any organizations, they've got salaries to pay, and if you quit paying people, they quit showing up to work. And they're running the West Bank, for all intent and purposes. They've been getting money from the UN and getting money from USAID, and the USAID money's going away. And they've been getting a lot of money from Iran, and that's been disrupted, I would hope. We may continue to do that. So I think the smart money on is, maybe I'll let this shake out before I commit to supporting Hamas. And they haven't been getting a lot of good PR in the Arab world because people are beginning to see how they're treating their own people. And to be quite honest, the Palestinians aren't very popular in the Arab world. Anyway, they're a cause célèbre. They use them as a foil against the Israelis. But you'll notice no one is stepping up and saying, tell you what, they bomb in Gaza, come live in our country. None of them are saying that.
So I appreciate you.
Won't even let them cross the border to get a drink of water.
Yeah, I've seen the pictures of the wall, the fence between Egypt and Gaza. But do me a favor, explain the history of why, in your thoughts, that those Arab countries in that area, none of them will take the Palestinians. Why is that?
They're pains in the ass, to be quite honest. They're just a resource suck, and they're irritating, they're annoying, and they always pick the wrong side. The Palestinians in Kuwait, for example, sided with Saddam when he invaded. Well, guess who pissed off the Kuwaitis? So when the war was over, Kuwaitis kicked every one of them out of the country. Saudis basically did the same thing too. The Saudis, they had a lot of Palestinian workers in Saudi Arabia. They sent a lot of them packing, saying, nope, you supported Saddam, get the hell out of here. We'll take Pakistanis, Filipinos, Indonesians, other Muslims who are less of a pain in the ass. And and they're demanding, it says, you got to give us this, you got to give us that. And they're like, I don't think I do. So, they're just tired of it.
I appreciate the background, the historical part to it. I'm not saying, I'm not picking a side. You guys know me. I don't like this whole Middle East stuff. I don't think we should be there. I'm not a big fan of the Israelis or the Iranians. But this meme popped up earlier today. And at least the left side showing, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the other terrorist groups hiding behind innocent civilians is a thing, right? They like to do this in hospitals. Randy, just a quick question for you, and I've never asked this before. Did you run into these guys like Hamas, Hezbollah, or anything like that during GWAT?
So, not generally. I will say in 2003, during the initial invasion, there was one ambush at Highway 8 and 1, right. So basically the airport fell, right? We took the airport, and the next day, which my unit, the infantry task force that I was in, had leapfrogged the entire way. Then we get the stand down after we take the airport, and they send 2nd Brigade up, and I was in 1st Brigade. And so anyway, they go up and there's an ambush at 8 and 1 where there was actually Syrian troops and some Jordanians, which I suspect were not the good Jordanian side. They never made the news. I've told people that before. They say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. But I was there. So I know those guys were dead, and that's who they were. And they had kicked this ambush off. And it was a highly effective ambush because none of the others, and we had been in many ambushes, all of them were, well, we'll just say pitiful. There wasn't one that was effective. They weren't good ambushes, but this was the first one that we had been in that was effective and good. And it was how one should be done. And it was other people running it. And then fast forward to when I was in 2006, there were pockets of them there. And in fact, I was not in the green zone. I was out in the red zone, and an area across the river from the green zone, or from the Tigris, which was called Dura. And I was in a house that used to be a general's. And literally right across the river from us, and not very far out of the green zone, there was a building that literally was just catty corner. We looked at it every single day right across the river. We know the Iranians were in there, but there was nothing we could do about it. We weren't supposed to mess with them or anything. It was just weird. But so they were there, and certainly when you start seeing the insurgency in Iraq, and then you start hearing things like foreign fighters, that's who we're talking about. when the sniper came in that then started shooting soldiers in the face, and where all your conventional forces then said, hey, the gunner needs to now be sitting in the Humvee. That was a foreign fighter, and he was one of those. I don't know which, I can't tell you which one it is, but I know that he was. So yeah, they were there. I don't think operating on the scale like we saw until ISIS, and then after ISIS, what we've seen since and October 7th, it seems like they've turned into a bigger, different animal.
No, I appreciate that. And that's interesting, as you said, as to what's evolved to today. So Jeff pointed out, I want to say a couple of weeks ago, that Iran would be cutting their nose off to spite their face if they shut down the Strait of Hormuz, because they make all of their oil on the west side of it, and China is their biggest customer. Right. So just the last couple articles that we have on today's terrorism SITREP is there's an interesting chain of events here. So you have a ship in the Red Sea that's attacked by the Houthis, who've been financed by the Iranians. But I suspect Jeff's comments of Hamas not getting the funding from the Iranian government probably extends to the Houthis as well. So we've got the Houthis attacking one of these container ships, and then you immediately thereafter that have Israel launching airstrikes towards Yemen and the Houthi rebels. And then the Houthis turn around and launch another missile at Israel. John, I want to come to you for this. It seems to me like these alliances in the Middle East don't hold up very well. And I know this is something you like to study as far as like geopolitical tensions and whatnot are concerned. What are your thoughts on the Houthis now sabotaging that shipping lane, which Iran counts on? If they don't get the money from China, they're in even deeper trouble, right?
That's absolutely true. But I think the situation with the Houthis is, in a sense, that if they're not controlling that area or terrorizing that area, what is their justification for being? I mean, that has become their identity, essentially, that that's what they do. And so I've never really totally understood how they're continuously allowed to do that. When you think about all the different interests that are in that area that have an interest in getting that oil out of there, from China to Iran to, you know, the Europe and to a lesser extent, United States. I've never understood why we put up with that, because maybe I just don't know the tactical situation. But it seems to me, of all the different terrorist groups, this group would be one that you would have the most cohesion to take out. And I would think, and I don't want to say they'd be easy, but it'd be a lot easier, I think, to take them out than it would be like Hezbollah or Hamas that are in these big population centers and intertwined. So I've never really understood why they were allowed to operate the way they are. Maybe, you know, our friends here on the panel that have more of an insight on that. But that's always perplexed me, Chris, is why they've been allowed basically to operate for several decades now. I don't understand it.
Well, let's take it in that direction with Jeff MD here. And Jeff, I just want to preface it by saying, or asking, I should say, so Hezbollah has, you know, terrorists deployed around the world. Unit 910 is their global reach. And Hamas to a lesser extent. Do the Houthis have global resources like Hezbollah and Hamas do?
No, not really. And just to clarify, the Houthis cannot and have not done anything to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. The ships they've been attacking are in the Red Sea, not the Persian Gulf. They're on the other side of the Arabian Peninsula. So that has nothing to do with Iranian oil, and it doesn't affect the Chinese.
Okay, appreciate that.
What it does is it blocks the entrance. It screws up the entrance and exit from the Suez Canal. And there's a lot of trade that goes through the Suez Canal. So
appreciate
people are
clarification.
Their only real supporters are the Iranians.
Yep.
The Saudis hate them. And there's two governments in Yemen. There's the official government in the south, which is a disaster. And then the Houthis can have kind of the mountainous parts. And the reason they're a little hard to take out is there's not a lot of them, and they're scattered over these rugged mountains. Yeah. So, you know, it's really kind of hard to narrow them down, at least with Hamas. They're in the Gaza Strip, and the Gaza Strip isn't that big. Yeah. But the Houthis have a large territory, and and they're basically goat herders. They don't have big urban centers. They don't have, they're not relying on power plants and everything else. But you got to remember, every time they lob a missile, it's an Iranian missile.
Yeah.
Houthis have no indigenous capabilities whatsoever. I doubt they could make a bullet, let alone a rocket. So they're getting that crap from Iran, and Iran can go, don't look at us, we didn't shoot it. Well, you just gave it to the guy who did.
Like that typical Iranian,
Exactly.
chess move, do it by proxy, right?
Do it through proxies. And Houthis are one of their, and of their other two proxies, you got Hamas and Hezbollah. Well, Syria is gone since it's no longer Iranian proxy at all. The other two are under the thumb of the Israelis right now. So the only one that has any kind of latitude in doing anything are the Houthis.
So I'd like you to speak to this, Jeff, and then I've got some other stuff. We'll go back to Randy and John in just a second. But I could have sworn that I read somewhere that Yemen has the lowest average IQ of any country in the world out of all, whatever it is, 193, 194 countries worldwide. So I punched it into Claude. This is the old Claude, though, because the new Claude is very politically correct. The old one, not so much.
Yeah.
And it came back and said the average IQ in Yemen is around 85. I mean, you're almost to the point of, what we would consider retardation, right?
Yeah, if that's your average. Yeah.
Right.
And I've known Yemenis, nice enough. I knew this one guy. He was a nice enough guy, and I knew his son and some of his kids and stuff. Nice enough people, but not rocket scientists. I'm not trying to disparage an entire group of people, but this one guy, even though he was fairly high up, was not a rocket scientist. And a lot of them are on cotton all the freaking time. It's a narcotic that they chew, and I swear to God, they're on that shit 24/7.
Randy was asking, doing what?
Cot. It's cot. Yeah.
Cot.
Yeah.
KHAT. It's a plant that they chew. It's popular in Yemen, Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, in that area around the Horn of Africa and on the other side.
Well, Chris, I was going to say that we didn't even only people like me and Jeff ever even heard of the Houthis for a long time until Obama and then Biden gave Iran all that money. And then all of a sudden the Houthis became national news.
Yeah. They pestered the Saudis, and the Saudis would blow them up. But the Saudis had this low intensity war going on with them for years because, the Houthis do these little hit and run things but that's part of Saudi Arabia. It's very desolate. There's not much there. So they'd bomb them and then go home.
Well, I appreciate the clarification there. So we're going to wrap up today's terrorism SITREP just with a couple notes here. So I go to all these different AIs, then I kind of put my own spin on things, and then I ask people in our group what they think and then come up with some conclusions. So right now, the global terrorism threat is elevated. Active operations by groups, ISIS, AQ, in the Middle East and Africa in particular. Again, if you go to the religionofpeace.com, you'll see an incredible number of terrorist attacks that never make the news over here in America. According to CSIS and their global terrorism threat assessment for 2025, Africa is actually the most active theater, bar none, even more so than the Middle East. So it's interesting that the Houthis are still hanging on, even though all their financing typically comes from the Iranians. Actually, before I move on any further, Jeff, how wealthy are the Houthis in Yemen in general relative to other countries in that area? My understanding is they're fairly poor.
Oh, yeah, they're dirt poor. I mean, they're goat herders.
All right. Now, I appreciate that clarification. Okay. So then as far as the American threat environment is concerned, I got to throw this out there just because it drives me nuts. But even to this day, when you go to DHS, FBI, anybody like that, they say that the number one terrorist threat to America is white middle-aged guys who are lone wolves. And that's just not the case. If that was the case, I'm pretty sure everybody would know it, as I've said before. And so this is an example of when I go out and I query all these different sources and it comes back with malarkey like that. I know it's a Joe Biden word. but it makes me dig a little bit deeper. And personally, from what I can gather from reputable sources, the lone actors are people who've been radicalized online by Islamic interests, not, white, middle-aged white guys who are, whatever, white supremacist sort of thing. And that, of course, would also extend to Hezbollah and Hamas, who we know have sleeper cells here. And even though we've got this momentary, brief ceasefire, let's call it, between Iran and Israel, Iran issued a fatwa. They've got a pool going now where people can donate money. It's kind of like a give, send, go. Last time I checked yesterday, it was up to $18 million for the person who kills Donald Trump. The Iranians are not going to go away, and the Iranians are not going to stop any of their terrorist activities just because of the ceasefire. They're going to lick their wounds and try to rebuild to their best of their ability and come at us again. So on screen here is our daily SITREP. And if you go to survivaldispatchnews.com, you can sign up for free and get a lot of stuff for free, including the daily SITREP like this. So the first half is a terrorism SITREP, and the second half is a SITREP on the topic of the day, which is the Texas flooding. And for those people who do pay $7.99 a month or $75 a year, you'll see at the bottom here, they get all of our sources everywhere that we pluck that information from. So moving on from there, actually, I have one last thing to discuss from a terrorism perspective. And John, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. There were 11 instances over the weekend of private planes flying in restricted airspace over Trump's Bedminster golf course in New Jersey. Not one or two, 11. And if you dig into this a little bit deeper, it's been happening on a regular basis over Mar-a-Lago as well. And my suspicion is that these terrorist groups like to, test what the limits are. How far can they intrude on something? How much can they get away with? Do you have any thoughts on these flyovers by chance, John? I don't know if you had a chance to look into it or not, but interesting.
Yeah, I did some. And I think part of it is the way Donald Trump is treated by the opposition and by the mainstream media, because, if the guy is Hitler, and now what Ocasio-Cortez said, that they just made a deal with the devil, and that, anything goes with that. So there's no respect to a certain extent that might have been afforded someone like Obama, and we're not going to do that. They feel empowered to do it, whether it's terrorists or just curiosity seekers and that type of thing, or media people trying to get a special photograph. It's more like paparazzi, how they do it. It seems that way. And this is only going to get worse with the drones and the new technologies. It's only going to exacerbate the problem. And I agree with you 100% about Iran is not going to give up, because kind of like what I said about the Houthis, if you think about it, if you're run by the Ayatollah, you can't really make a peace agreement with anybody, because you lose your whole sense of who you are, because they're supposed to be the last one standing after the world is obliterated, right? I mean, basically they have an apocalyptic celebration, if you will. And I think another thing that doesn't get enough credit is you talked about Donald Trump and the bounty on his head. Just how courageous Donald Trump actually is. He gets very little credit for that. They did, the media said, oh, you even had the director of the FBI at the time say, well, we're not sure it was a bullet. It might have been shrapnel from the Monitor or something like that. Donald Trump is one of the most courageous people out there when you think about the legitimate threats to his life and to his family and all of that kind of stuff. So I suspect all of that, shake it all up, it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse for Donald Trump, and he doesn't get the overall respect that he deserves for the position he has, even if you totally disagree with the man.
I'll caveat Chris on that and say, we have a good example about the Islam faith and those state-run countries. It's supposed to be the religion of peace, but none of them are happy and none of them are peaceful. And there's no peace in the Middle East. And lastly, I will close with saying these people between the Shia and the Sunni, for all those that haven't heard this before, the reason they're still cutting each other's heads off today is when Muhammad died in 630, whatever it was, and he didn't leave an heir to the throne. He didn't say, this is who's next. So both the Shia and the Sunni assumed that they had the rightful heir, and they've been killing each other ever since. And that was, like I said, in like 630 something. I don't remember exactly when he died, but it was in the 600s. And they're still cutting each other's heads off today in 2025 over it. So they're not going to forget.
Yeah, I appreciate you adding that context. And, you know, for the women who are watching, there's a guy thing where we like to poke fun at each other, and it's never personal. It's just a guy thing, okay? So I got to do a really quick audience poll here. Who hears in their head Hootie and the Blowfish every time John says the Houthis? Every time he says it, all I can think of is Hootie and the Blowfish. If you agree with me, put a 1 in the live chat.
Oh yeah.
If you don't agree with me, put a 2 in the live chat. But somebody else has got to be with me on this. You got to back me up on this one. But here's the bounty that Iran put on Trump, and it just keeps going up. People can donate to it from around the world. Brutal stuff, to say the least.
Yeah, half of it probably came from Hollywood.
Yeah.
Probably so. We should be tracking who's putting money in there.
No shit.
Yeah, you just said a mouthful there. I want to address something that John said about Trump being brave. There was an episode, one of these talking head shows on CNN yesterday, and I can't remember who this panelist was. I've seen him before. I just don't remember his name. And he was going on ad nauseum on how Ma'am Danny has got Trump on the run, and Trump is afraid of Ma'am Danny, a guy who got less than 5% of the overall votes in New York City. But Trump is afraid of him now. Trump is afraid of Ma'am Danny. I'm thinking to myself, the guy gets shot in the head and stood up and had the presence of mind to go fight, like this. But yeah, he's afraid of Ma'am Danny. Okay.
They think anything they make up and say, the people just believe it, I guess.
Absolutely. So that's actually a pretty good dovetail into fake news. So I've got 4 links up on fake news that we're going to debunk right now. And we're going to get in the habit of doing this on a nightly basis unless we have a special guest. And we'll pick a couple things there at the top of the news cycle as far as fake news is concerned. So you've got the mainstream media since Friday night has been trying to claim that Trump made cuts to the NOAA, National Weather Service, etc. And as a result of those cuts, that's why these people perished in Texas, because they weren't given enough notification. And that's just not the truth. So I'm going to whip through 3 of these fairly quickly, and then I'll come to you first, Jeff. So meteorologist says the NWS did their job in Texas, and they did it well. All I'll say is this: the National Weather Service issued a flood watch for Kerr County more than 12 hours ahead of the catastrophic flood. A flash flood warning was issued for Hunt and Ingram 3 hours before the Guadalupe started to climb. They did their job, and they did it well. Moving on to the next one here. Update. The Associated Press reports the National Weather Service had extra staff on duty in the region where floods wreaked havoc in Texas. The number of staff more than doubled in the office. This is a major blow to the Democrat narrative blaming budget cuts. Plus, warnings were sent out hours beforehand. So the mainstream media actually is trying to say that they got caught in a lie. So they backed it up by saying, well, the person who in the past was in charge of whatever they call their information officer, he wasn't there. And therefore, that's why this happened, trying to blame it on just one person. And I don't know if the guy quit, got fired, or left for whatever reason, but that's besides the point. And here's the third and final one on this particular part of fake news tonight, although I do have actually one more that's kind of related. So George Stephanopoulos on At This Week ABC. We're also learning there were significant staffing shortfalls to the National Weather Services in the region. And that was yesterday, for crying out loud, after it was already proven that this was fake news. So this person, Sonny, says this is a blatant lie, and one that's been proven a lie by experts on both sides of the aisle. 54 seconds.
Oh, yeah. We're also learning that there were significant staffing shortfalls to the National Weather Services offices in the region.
George, right now, the local county officials really didn't want to address that just yet. What they are telling us is they expected between 4 and 6 inches of rain. That is what weather experts told them, the National Weather Service as well. They also knew that in remote locations, they might get anywhere from 8 to 10 inches. But this amount of rain in such a short amount of time, it was very difficult to navigate. And when the Department of Homeland Security Secretary was here just yesterday, she acknowledged this was an issue. She was going to take these concerns to the White House as well and try and see if there was anything they could do to revamp the system. She says the president is committed to it.
Maria, thanks very much.
So George Stephanopoulos looks disappointed there that she didn't go along with, him throwing that piece of bait out there. Jeff, your thoughts on this piece of fake news, trying to blame this on Trump and cuts?
Well, yeah, I mean, my God, if a meteor hit the Earth, they would blame Trump because of some NASA budget cut somewhere, and it's ridiculous. But it just tells you how rabidly anti-Trump they are. An act of God is now somehow Trump's fault. But I'm glad that it's being quickly corrected. Now, they won't be correcting it on the ABC Evening News, but it is getting out there. So if anybody's really interested, if you go to X, or God forbid you go to Blue Sky, they're going to be parroting this stuff all day long, depending on which side the aisle you're on. But yeah, it's just shameful. It's like the same ones that saying, these little kids deserved it because their parents were conservative.
Yeah, I think one of the best ones I've heard, Jeff, is that if Trump walked on water, the headlines would read, "Trump can't swim."
Yeah.
So before I come to you for your comments, Randy, and because this is fairly close to you geographically speaking and otherwise, Christopher Wray said last year, he was testifying to Congress on a Wednesday, and he said that Donald Trump wasn't shot, that it was debris from a teleprompter and a steel railing. And of course, the footage showed that this is in Butler, PA, July 13th last year. The teleprompter there was no damage to the teleprompter. We got some feedback coming from one of y'all. Coming from you, Randy. There we go. Apologies. And then late Friday evening, there was a one-page press release from the FBI that said Christopher Wray wasn't right and that Trump was indeed hit by a bullet. But like you said, if the mainstream media figures, if they keep repeating the same lie, people will believe it. Well, what I've found as well is they don't care if they're debunked, because they will have the weak-minded amongst us will latch onto something like the one headline saying Trump wasn't shot. And to this day, they'll tell you that Trump wasn't shot because they heard Christopher Wray say it. And they don't care if that was recanted by the FBI or not. Thoughts on, as a Texan, and you've got friends who, I'm going to let you tell the audience what you told us beforehand, if you don't mind, as far as, you've got a personal connection here to the losses incurred.
Yeah. So, first I'll preface by saying that, there's something nefarious about this whole thing. I don't care what anybody says. 30-inch, the river rising 30 feet in about 45 minutes is not a natural occurrence unless we're talking about biblical floods. And this is not a biblical event. That being said, I do have a personal connection to it because I have a good friend. Him and his wife were down there, and unfortunately they were on one of the cabins on that trailer at the RV park there that was right on the river. So they did call up to the cabins up on the hill where his mother-in-law and brother-in-law were, and they were able to get out. But his name is Jeff Ramsey. He goes by Ram. His wife is Tanya Ramsey. Both of them were swept away in the cabin. They've been missing. At some point on early Saturday, they had identified him, but as it turns out, when the family got there, it was not him. So they have been missing until this morning, and they found her remains. So Tanya has been found, and she's deceased, and they're still looking for Ram. So, it's been a close personal thing because these are really good folks. To know Jeff, such a good guy and a giving heart, you know what I mean? He was a real tough guy, real strong, but just a really good heart. And I met him through the Adaptive Training Foundation, which is a gym I helped train at, and I've went through the program myself. And what it does is help disabled folks basically take back their lives. And he's been a huge supporter of that the entire time it's been open. And it's a huge loss for our community for sure. There's no way to replace a Jeff and Tanya Ramsey. And so, you know, I think that, you know, the stuff like Christopher Wray, you know, one, people like that need to be charged and held accountable. And the other part we have with the press, whether this is George Stephanopoulos, you know, all I thought was, you know, I wonder what they got on him, because he knows this is a lie by now. He knows it's a bold-faced lie, and he goes ahead and puts it out on TV, even though he knows it isn't true. So in my mind, you know, you're a smart guy, George. Why would you do that unless somebody was making you? But on the flip side of that is, because it's no different now, we can't hold the press accountable when they just say bold-faced lies on TV to the entire nation. There is no accountability. And, you know, we look at all the stuff. Heck, let's just take the 39 felonies, you know, these trumped up charges. And sorry for the pun, but that's exactly what they were. Now that the appeals court threw it out, you know, he got his money back. It's not a conviction. Have you heard one news media say that? No. But they had no problem putting out over and over and over that he's been convicted of 39 felonies. But because they don't have to come back and say we were wrong, it just continues. Like you said, then the fools that continue to have it on to this day, turn that on every day. You're just listening. You're just getting programmed every single day.
True story. Before I come to you, John, I got to back up to Jeff just for a second, because this is directly in his wheelhouse and addresses what Randy brought up. So in 2012, when the annual hearings came up for the NDAA, so the National Defense Authorization Act, every year it gets voted on by Congress. Money gets allocated for various things. And in typical fashion, other things like pork get bolted onto the NDAA, even though it has nothing to do with national defense. And Obama and his people enacted what's called the Smith-Muntz Modernization Act in 2012 during the NDAA negotiations, and it was part of the NDAA, which again is an annual bill. And prior to that, the intelligence agencies like the CIA that Jeff was in, they had very specific guidelines to follow that changed dramatically as a result of that legislation that have created the situation that Randy just described. Jeff, what happened in 2012 with that Modernization Act?
Well, the law said prior to that you could not propagate, you know, everybody does propaganda, and if anyone says they don't, they're lying. But what we did is we were not allowed to issue propaganda in the United States. You can't propagandize your own citizens. And that is part of our charter. We are, you know, CIA is a foreign intelligence service. We don't really have a domestic mission. We do work in the U.S., but it's aimed at foreigners in the U.S. That rolled that back and basically said that the government could propagandize in the United States. And that really undermines the First Amendment in that you can't trust your own government to tell you the truth anymore. Not that you always could anyway, but at least they now it's illegal for them to basically lie to you. Yep. And to me, that is, well, it's just anti-American, un-American.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but my recollection of that act also is that prior to 2012, if one of these agencies was going to give information to a reporter, the reporter had to specifically say which agency gave them that information. And that requirement is now gone as far as the law is concerned. Does that ring a bell?
Well, if it was an official release, yeah, they would do that. But everybody's leaked information to everybody. And it overseas is primarily where we called them, you had reporter assets or agents of influence. You know, influencers before they were influencers. And you would have a reporter who worked for Le Monde in Paris, and he would put in an article or an op-ed or something favorable to the position the U.S. wanted. You know, that Russia bad, NATO good, or something like that. And that's been going on ever since there have been freaking newspapers. And we did it, and the Russians do it too. And we did it in 1948 aggressively in Italy. The Russians did too, because the Italians were having a referendum to say, do we want to be capitalist? We want to be communist. And there was a lot of stuff going back and forth from both sides on that. Fortunately, we won the battle, and they stayed. It became capitalist. They voted down communism.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I just want to give a shout out here to Long Story and this comment with regards to Texas weather modification. The entire second half of tonight's broadcast is on that very topic, and that's a worthwhile comment. Thank you for making that. John, I want to get your thoughts on the 2012 Smith Modernization Act and the opening the floodgates of propaganda from the government to the American public domestically.
Well, I'm sitting here thinking about several different examples, and the first one that came to mind was Donald Rumsfeld. I mean, it's classic where he gets a question about the Department of Disinformation in the Pentagon, and he says, "Well, I'm referring all questions to said department." So I'm reminded of that. I don't know if you remember that, but he literally said that. And then you had, I'm thinking about an episode of Seinfeld where Jerry's wanting to take this lie detector test and try to pass it. And he's asking George how to do it. And the kids were like, I can't teach you that. And finally he tells to him, he said, just keep this in mind. It's not a lie if you believe it. And that right there is exactly what the mainstream media does. It's not a lie because they believe it. And then reality comes in. And remember, this doesn't get much coverage, but because they're talking about Biden being incoherent. Well, that's the first time I ever saw them actually correct a real transcript. You remember they would have his speech transcribed and they would come back and correct for clarification the actual transcribed transcript. And so I'm like, if they're doing that and we know they're doing it and they're putting it right out in front of us, I mean, what are they capable of actually doing that we don't know? So I think to me, the bottom line is that's why programs like you're doing here, Chris, are so important. And that's why, like Ted and myself, my partner, Ted Yoho, we do our Political Pirate podcast because, you know, one of the overriding themes of our show is to educate, motivate, and activate people. Well, if you look at the left, they're motivated and they're activated, but they're not educated in any real sense of what's actual reality. So, you know, I do believe that that we're in a time now that's, like I said, I think on the last show I did with you, that Goebbels, you know, everybody talks about telling a lie, but he also said that the media was like a keyboard that they could play. Yeah. And that's exactly what's happening here. So to me, you shake it all up and it makes what you're doing, Chris, vital if people actually want to get truth, because they're not going to get it from the mainstream media, because even Fox News, you know, they're playing to a market themselves. Yeah. And you look at they're all about profit and everything else. So the only time you're going to find straight talk is on shows like yours. That's why I'm honored to be here.
I appreciate that.
Not me. Hold all calls.
Yeah, no problem. Actually, I'm going to see if we can't get Doc Pete on the phone here. Give me just a second.
Absolutely.
You have to bear with me. We've never actually used this before, so we're going to give it a try now. Doc, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Can you all hear Doc on your end?
Yes.
Yep. You got it? Hey, it actually worked, Doc. Imagine that. You are the first person. You have you've de-virginized my audio mixer here. So I just for the audience's sake here, we're moving on from fake news to real news now, and discussing what's going on in Texas. And we've got Lieutenant Colonel Doc Pete Chambers on the air, and he's been working tirelessly since Friday. Doc, the floor is yours to give us an update, please.
Yeah, Raj. Yeah, we hit the scene about 2 hours after the kickoff of this operation, which was the 0400 notification that I got that Camp Mystic went down. We knew there were storms coming. Didn't really pay attention to typical go to bed. It's 2 hours away from me, but at the time, so we lit out, went over there just with two of us that were staying in the operations center. We got out there with Joe. We hit on the way down. We stopped at Comfort first because we're talking about the Guadalupe corridor. The area that was affected is about 100 miles really totally, but that area there is about 30-mile swath where most of the devastation took place because so many campgrounds on the river's edge. Some of those places crested up to 40 feet. San Saba 40 feet, 39 feet where we were at, where most of the bodies that we recovered were at 32.4 feet there at Ingram, which is real close to, it's tied right next to Kerrville that everybody hears about. Upstream of there, about 11 miles upstream as the crow flies, probably about 10 miles, probably about 7 miles. That's where Hunt, Texas is. That's the area where the kids in the Camp Mystic were. So, that was the most devastating of all because it's just, a lot of kids. But, the campground that I went into day one was right there at Kerrville. And that one was the Blue Oak RV spot. That was completely wiped off the map. There were about 20 people that were sitting out on a kind of a little island inlet thing that went out into the river. The owners of the place said they were out there screaming at them, get out, get out, get out. And they said that half of them could make it to them and the other half they watched them get washed away. So it's just that's what happened. So that's where we focused there. We paired up with Heroes for Humanity. They're a group out of Dennis Price is their OIC or their 1IC, first in charge, former MARSOC Marine. Those guys got in the water pretty quick with their diving stuff. Once the water receded, we got another storm that came in. We had 16 plus hours day one of rotating storm over our head. And that's, we're talking about torrential downpours. The concern was, the guys are in water and now all of a sudden we got another flash flood. So we were able to set spotters way upriver because we just didn't trust what we were seeing on with real time with regard to the recovery efforts. So we set a spotter out there, some kids that we knew locally, and they just called us and said, hey, it's rise and get out of the water. So that's what we did. We were able to, by day two, get a lot more relief when it comes to just the backside support, the logistics of this thing. Then on, for me as a coordinator, if you will, of the civilian response, SAR, dog teams, logistics, and then spotters going out into the periphery. We're talking about, all the way from, if anybody knows that, Texas, San Angelo up to Brownwood, all the way down to the I-35 corridor at New Braunfels. You have difference in the way water hits an urban area versus hitting the riverbanks, obviously, and so urban area it doesn't sink in the ground. So it just literally shut down Highway 35, which is right there, that northwest corridor that cuts America in half, goes all the way to Minnesota. So all of that being said, the civilian response was probably, in my estimate, the first ones on the scene, just like North Carolina, and state came in pretty quick with DPS, Department of Public Safety, and game wardens. They were bringing the boats out. They did a pretty good job of coming out there and helping us, but I'm going to tell you, this was 2/3 citizens and 1/3, government, which is kind of how we see things on the ground. I don't know if there's a state emergency declaration. I haven't been paying attention to that because I'm focused on the tactical situation. But now I am talking to operational elements that do reach up into the higher elements of nationwide response teams, which is going to be folks like Steve Slepcevich and that come in with serious packages. And so we'll be able to handle this. This was not the same thing as North Carolina in the sense that it's so hard to get to things. It's easier to get to things because roads are following the river. But that's where we're at. So today, low ops for me, I'm refitting, but I'm also just running 3 phones at the same time and multiple packages going in and out. But I do have a lot more help, which helps me.
A couple quick questions for you, Doc. And actually just one quick statement. I believe I asked you and Major Mike Hall this question when you all were in North Carolina and you'd been there for a period of time, maybe upwards of a month or so. And we asked how many government officials were on scene versus y'all in the private sector. And I want to say you guys said it was 90% private citizens, 10% government, if memory serves me right.
Yep. That was exactly what it was. And the problem is they wouldn't get up into the hills because they were afraid of Appalachian people shoot down helicopters, which was a bunch of hooey. So that was their excuse they gave to me personally when they came to the Avery Airport. We had a conversation about their weakness, But yeah, no, that's there. The conversion factor here is 2/3 citizens, 1/3 local and state. So it's about right, because if you think about it, they just don't have the same assets we have when it comes to bodies, going out and looking.
So what's the current status look like, Doc? Are there still, I'm assuming there's a sizable number of bodies, the people who are still missing that are presumed dead?
Yeah, absolutely. It's in the hundreds. And then there are 100 that are confirmed bodies that are, in body bags right now, unfortunately. And next to kin notification is going out, and of course being able to identify. That's the hard part of this thing is, I'm doing a lot of bereavement just on the river's edge, with bereavement discussions with people, because it's really hard. You can't walk by them without talking to them and praying for them. So it makes it hard, but it's what I do. I've done that my whole career.
Yeah, and when we were texting back and forth, you've been on the front lines, like literally recovering bodies over the past 48 hours,
sir.
Correct? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Most of the team guys took over that from me, because, I was a 1-2-man show early on, about 3 hours into the thing. And that water was so high, I couldn't get in the water, but we were meeting people on the river's edge that were completely wet, and just getting them blankets and moving them over to the side. The water was just too swift to do, and I didn't have swift water rescue stuff. I'm just, my pickup truck, Joe, my dog, and Matt, my partner that would help me on. He's our drone operator, but we weren't able to fly drones in the middle of that deluge of rain.
Yeah, amazing. So Randy has a personal connection. He's got friends who are missing down there right now, and
I'm sure he does. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to give each of the guys a chance to ask you any questions they might have. But Randy, I'll go to you first, and maybe just give Doc the Cliff Notes version of the folks who are missing.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Hey, Doc, it's Randy. Yeah. So I knew a guy named Jeff and Tanya Ramsey. There are a couple from up here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that are really great people that are very caring and giving a lot to the community, certainly in the adaptive community and the adaptive athlete community that I've been immersed in here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And they were down there in the cabins, I think at the HRT location, and they were right on the water. So he was able to call up to the up a little bit higher up on the hill where, in another cabin, his brother-in-law and mother-in-law were. Now they were able to get out, but Tanya and Jeff did not. And apparently they found Tanya this morning, obviously, and she's deceased.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that was it. And I'm just saying they're still looking for Jeff, or he has not been identified by his family yet. I don't know, but so to us,
I did see their picture. I didn't know. Yeah, I did see their picture. I did not know that you were acquaintances, but I've got pictures of everybody, and it's just we keep them kind of sorted out as to as we go from obviously rescue to recovery. And that period was really a small window. They had word of kids being found in trees and somewhere, but that was earlier on than the other two. They called it fake news. I think it's just fog of war. Honestly, I don't think it's fake news. It wasn't intentional, I don't believe.
Sure. Yeah.
I appreciate that, Doc. Jeff, MD, any questions for Doc?
Mute.
You're on mute, Jeff.
No, hey Doc. No, I used to live.
Hey, brother.
I used to live in San Antonio, and I know the Kerrville area pretty well. And it's really sad that this has happened. And just wish you guys, all the best of luck and stay safe out there, because it's gonna be a mess.
Yeah.
Well, actually, on that topic, Doc, what happened yesterday? We got this notice saying that there was a wall of water heading towards your position. And I texted you, knowing full well that you probably knew it in advance. But what happened there? Did you all have to leave like the immediate area while a wall of water?
Yeah, affirmative. It was not a wall of water. The wall of water was the initial, which was at that location was 34.6 feet. This one came up to about 15 higher. It was enough for us to get out of the water. Obviously, our spotters weren't on that one because they just had to move. But yeah, we got everybody out of the water in plenty of time, and we're watching it, and we watch the the different websites as to what's going on. But sometimes there's a little lag with those things. Sometimes they're spot on. It's just it's hit and miss. But I'm not going to risk anybody's life, and of course, the guys get frustrated, but they get over it. Yeah. Look, this is for me emotionally is a downrange deployment, because you got your highs and then you got your broken heart moments, and then you got times where you're emboldened because you're watching citizens and law enforcement and recovery and from all kinds of states. You know, the Cajun Navy boys are out here. They're getting after it. They got some heavy equipment.
Nice.
You know, I've known them for a long time, since, you know, Harvey and Rita, Katrina. So these guys are solid. So we're having the same kind of response nationwide, folks, which is awesome. But then again, there's those moments where you got to talk to somebody. And I literally had an EOC, Emergency Operations Center worker from Harris County, that's Houston area, drove over here just to volunteer. And he was looking for his, you know, while he's looking for other people, he's looking for his sister, his brother-in-law, and his nephew. So there I met him at Water's Edge, you know, balling. Like, you okay, bro? And he goes, no, my sister's in there. We found her and her truck. We did not find the other two.
Oh, that's awful. So before I pass you over to John Martin's with us to ask any questions he might have, I got two quick questions. How long were the youngins in that tree before your crew rescued them?
Yeah, it was not my crew. You know, I can't say that I have operational control over anybody other than my guys, but administrative control I have, which means I'm kind of helping to organize. Okay. But right now, you know, they've kind of lit on their own because there's other support, which is great, and I don't have to herd that many cats. But I don't mind doing that, because that's, you know, it helps us to you know, force multiply and, you know, do what we do, right? So that's but yeah, there was another crew, but yeah, definitely part of that initial package.
So my last question before I pass you off to John is, we've got people in our audience. We're broadcasting out to 9 different platforms right now, and multiple people are asking what they can do to help, Doc.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's a great question. We are overloaded on supplies right now. We need to stair step this out and kind of, you know, push out a little bit on that. I had Mike Adams on the phone a little bit ago. He's got 5 semis loaded. I don't need them just yet. So he did that same thing in North Carolina, and we're talking about food, supplies, all kinds of stuff. I mean, survival gear. That's great, but what will happen is it will go to some distro center. It'll sit on the ground. People will pilfer it. Not the people that run the centers, but it just happens because they can watch them overnight. And so we want to make sure that we stair step that in as needed. And there are other places. I mean, Menard right now in Brady, that's what I was working on today. You know, they had flooding, and a nursing home was flooded out. So, you know, people are going there. So we'll have those needs. But right now, the main thing they can do is, you know, we're refit on donations right now, but we can always take more. That's the Remnant Ministry, tx.org. But also, because my bros on the ground there with Heroes for Humanity, they're in the box right now. And so they're going to need to resupply that same thing, because that pot of money, you know, I look at it like it's God's money, and that's going to give us the logistics to run the operations.
I appreciate that, Doc, and we'll make sure we throw up the links to all that stuff. So John Martin's a friend of ours from the other side of the state of Florida here, Doc. He was mayor and city controller over in the Gainesville area. He's kind of like one of those endangered species in the University of Florida areas. He's one of us, not one of the he doesn't have blue hair, put it that way. So,
yeah.
John, any questions do you have of Doc Pete, who, by the way, is running for governor of Texas? And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but go ahead.
Yeah,
John.
buddy.
Yeah, I got a question, because I was thinking of, I know obviously you're doing God's work out there and you're helping people and all that. I heard what you're doing in North Carolina, but watching the coverage, and I don't know how to word this exactly right, so I hope I do. It's almost like flip sides of the same coin. You have a group of people they interview that are like pastoral, and they're like questioning why this happens, that kind of thing. And then you got people on the other side that are saying, oh, well, this is an act of God, and these people, it's retribution for something like that. As someone who's been involved right in the middle of these kind of things, how do you respond to that type of stuff? Like the one side question, why would God allow this to happen? And the other side saying that it's some type of holy retribution. Neither one of them sound right to me, but I just wonder how you deal with that.
No, sir. Yeah, no, sir. You know, and we are a ministry. We are Association of Ministries, but we also do counter human trafficking and disaster relief. I have not got that question personally, but if I was to be asked that, this is not of God, right? This is not, period. He doesn't wish that on anyone, especially not on Texas, right? But you know, that's just a little tongue in cheek there. But honestly, we don't serve a God that does that. These things are of other places. These are dark places. And that's all I could say. And I don't know whether it's the clouds were formed by some machine or some kind of spray, but I promise you, I promised a grandfather last night, 2 nights ago, standing there with Lara Logan. She came down to do a spot down there by the water, but he was bawling because, you know, one of his grandchildren were found. And I promised him, I said, sir, I'll get to the bottom of it. I promise you that. I don't know if it's the whatever he thought it was, you know, some kind of geoengineering stuff. I'm like, that's a hard subject. I can't talk about that right now because I'm focused on people, but I will find out. I will find out. I promise you that. I don't know. I'm not the guy that has all the information, all that stuff. But you know but that's for later. That's the forensics of this thing. If it was man-made or if it wasn't, you know, water goes down and it falls. You know, it goes downhill and it's really bad and it was overwhelming. This is a historical, as far as numbers go. Number one, 1987, the last time there. This is historical proportions right now.
Yeah.
I just thank you for what you're doing. It's very inspirational. That gives people hope out there, not only for this, but the fact that there are still a lot of good people in this nation.
Oh yes, sir, there are, and you know, all the way down there to Gator Country. I mean, I've met them all, and you know, I did go to one Gator ground, and I know a good man out there that up in Ocala named Randy Osborne. I don't know if you know him, but he's a good man.
Yeah, good questions, John. I appreciate that. And Doc put a message out there over the weekend with regards to the whole weather modification stuff, and asked, you know, for people to look into it. We've got somebody by the name of Long Story. I'm not sure what platform they're on. I just see all the chat stuff going by me here, who's made a number of comments on the weather modification. And Doc, we've gathered a bunch of resources. I'm not a scientist or anything like that, but we're trying to figure things out as best as we can so we can pass it off to you when you're done. And you may recall, Doc, you called me about a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
So just a quick story, you know, involving Doc. He calls me about a year ago and says, hey, did you check out the NexRad towers and the storm going up the Ohio Valley last night? And I said, no, what are you talking about? He says, well, there's some time-lapse videos out there that shows the NexRad towers blasting out microwave radiation and, you know, essentially breaking the storm apart. And I searched all over and I couldn't find it. And then Doc said, well, add this additional word. And I found one copy of it. And he said to me, you better download that because we'll keep deleting it. And we mentioned this live on Survival Dispatch News, and I woke up the next morning to a strike on our channel for talking about it. So when we're going to
that's a dangerous, it's not a dangerous topic. Look, if you want to be a leader, you're going to have to take some shots, and you're not going to figure out what caliber they were. You're just going to move and communicate, right? And so you're going to take shots, but if you don't ever ask hard questions, you'll never find anything out. I don't know, right? I don't know what I don't know, but we can find out. And then, you know, I'm not going to talk politics right now because this isn't the place nor the time, but I'm going to tell you that, you know, accountability is a thing. Leadership is a thing. And, you know, if you're a public servant, act like one.
That's right.
Well said, Doc. So, Doc, appreciate the update from the front line. I would imagine that you're pretty tired. And
you know, hey, look, when you're tired, you still got to do it tired.
Oh, by the way, I was in a meeting with Mike Glover today, and he asked me to pass on his regards to you. Mike Glover is a good friend of all of ours. He's been completely vindicated of any baloney that y'all may have heard about him in a court of law, no less. And when I first said to Mike Glover that Doc Pete and I had been collaborating on something, his exact words were, Doc is the real thing. And clearly that's the truth. So, Doc, can't say thank you enough for the updates, and Godspeed and be safe.
Yeah, thank you for what you're doing, Doc Pete. You got my vote, buddy.
Hey, anytime you need, brother, I'll stop and see you one day.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Doc. Be safe.
Well, safe, man.
God bless.
All right, so just a couple quick things to share here. As I mentioned, while we had Doc on the phone, he is running for governor of Texas, and his platform is really, really solid. And he's a great guy who's dedicated his entire life to public service, 40 years in our military. He went through, and Randy, you gotta tell people just what this means. he went through the whole process of becoming a Green Beret at the age of 47. Randy, speak to what it takes to be a Green Beret.
Well, so it takes about 2 years, right, to go through all the training that's required. There are some downtimes, but there are definitely some times that you're in the field and you're having to hump it. And I did it at 34 and 35. I can't even imagine at 47.
That's what I was getting at. The guy's
can't even imagine.
He's a machine. Doc Pete's an absolute machine.
And he's also a surgeon, which is pretty phenomenal. A Green Beret and a surgeon. I think he's the only one, right? There's only one.
So Doc Pete is the only active duty. He's not active duty now. He's retired, but he was the only active duty Green Beret who had become a trauma surgeon while he was on active duty. Other trauma flight surgeons had got their credentials elsewhere. The guy's a machine.
He's got a couple extra gears, not just one. He's got a couple extra.
Yeah, he never sleeps. So if you're in the great state of Texas, do yourself a favor, do us a favor. Yes. If my home state of Texas doesn't vote Doc Pete in to be governor, I mean, you're missing out on what is probably the best candidate for governor ever in the state of Texas. And if you'd like to help out, remnantministrytx.org is the website for the group he keeps discussing. In other words, the other spec ops guys and soldiers who work with him, retired soldiers. And there's a button in the top right-hand corner here that says donate now. Anything you can do to help Doc is much appreciated. This is a nonprofit. No money goes into anybody's pockets. Major Mike Hall, for example, is his chopper pilot. He's active duty in the National Guard, and he will be a lieutenant colonel by this time next year as well. There's a bunch of guys like that are part of the Remnant A team, and they get paid precisely zero. Every penny that gets donated to the Remnant Ministry goes towards operational expenses and people who need the assistance. So anyway, but we're pretty fortunate to have friends like Doc Pete. So moving on from there, we're going to get into this main subject, and I'll go through it as fast as I can without doing it any disservice, just because we've been trying to wrap up at the 1 hour mark, and I want to be conscious of everybody's time. So first up here, and I think what we'll do to expedite things to cover as much ground as we can, and this is, by the way, we're only a couple slides away from doing precisely what Doc Pete said. We're going to stand in the gap. We're going to share some information with y'all that has got us strikes from YouTube in the past. And as the CEO and owner of Survival Dispatch, I don't care because we're going to do what we can to get the information out there. So first one I want to share is this hero here. So as catastrophic floods swept through central Texas, rescue swimmer Scott Ruskin and his Coast Guard air crew answered the call of duty without hesitation, saving 165 lives during his first rescue mission. That is a huge number. The extraordinary bravery and selfless service of Ruskin and his fellow first responders embody the very spirit of the United States Coast Guard and the best of what it means to be an American. And there he is. I mean, hats off to this young man. Phenomenal. 165 people rescued. Next one up here is from the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, of course, who's running for Senate. And John Cornyn doesn't stand a chance against Ken Paxton. But there are no words for how wrong it is that morally bankrupt people are trying to take advantage of Texans by using the tragedy to scam them. Anyone engaging in these scams will face the full force of the law, and I will not rest until they are brought to justice. So I'm going to play this 38-second video, but essentially what's happening is scammers are calling families who have missing family members, telling them that they have that person and they're holding them hostage. They've kidnapped them and that they need to pay them money to get them released. Despicable stuff. 38 seconds. If we can get the sound going here, let's try that again.
We also are getting a lot of fake calls. You're looking. This is a worldwide discussion, and we're dealing with scammers. Victims' families are being reached out to, saying that they have their kids, pay me money. It's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. We're dealing with with mental health issues where people are calling saying they have visions. All of these things we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and we're having to vet this information, and it becomes very taxing on our people. Again, this is an extremely heartbreaking. This is, if not the worst, one of the worst, disasters in this region in a very, very long time.
So I'm going to go ahead and stop there. So again, just to expedite getting through the content, I'll give one one post to each of you as we go through it. So I'll go to you first, Jeff. I'm just curious what you've seen during your career as far as, these despicable things that some people do.
Sadly, there's no bottom to where some people will sink. And these scammers who are trying to take advantage of these people in this kind of, when their heart's broken like this, there's a special place in hell for them. And I think the government should make sure they get there quickly.
And thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that. So, Randy, I'll come to you next, and then I'll go to John. So, land swallowed by water in under 60 minutes. This is not normal. And this kind of kicks off all of these suspicions around the weather modification angle to this. And if we get a strike, it will not be because we put any false information out there. There are tons of patents out there. We've been engaging in this since the late 1940s. Our government holds a bunch of patents. I want to say the first patent that I came across was 1948 and GE, maybe 1949. But anyway, check out this time-lapse video that really speaks to just the volume of water is insane. And there's no sound with this. So this is literally showing the water coming through. And as Doc said, like a wall of water. But you can see these people moving up this road. This is in the Texas Hill Country, by the way, for those of you who aren't familiar with that. And it's appropriately named. I've ridden my motorcycle through there many, many times. And just the sheer volume of water. And there's a reason I'm going to go to Randy on this is Randy, we've seen, over the years where, Texas has essentially a multi-year drought with very little rain. The ground is as hard as cement. And the last home I had in Arlington, just after I sold it, the back of the property went down into a floodplain, and the water came through, took the chain link fence down that I put up, and the neighbor's basketball hoop, which was on a slab down at the bottom, was underwater. And it, obviously it was 10 plus feet high. So your thoughts on this, Randy, because there's a whole lot of people that are saying this is just not possible from a rainstorm.
Well, as I spoke earlier, it supposedly this river rose about 30 feet in 45 minutes, so less than an hour. That is not normal. It never has been, as far as we know, and certainly in recorded history down there and in many places around the country, not just down in South Texas. But I've also seen a few videos today, like on this Facebook page. Hang on a second. Let me get the name of it. Alaska Skywatcher, right? And it has a bunch of videos, and something that you talked about earlier when the storm was headed toward Ohio and they released some microwaves to kind of weaken the storm. Well, the thing about that is,
or strengthen it. They can do.
Yeah, it does both.
Yes,
it does both, and that's what this guy's talking about. So much like some of the stuff earlier in the year or last year that we talked about and some of the weather things. There's plenty of video out there of the Dopplers, right? And watch this storm. Partly when it was offshore, he shows a video where there's a green and a red laser that hit the storm. And so it's like it's holding it off the coast for a little bit. Right where they intersect is where the storm is, and it sits there for a little bit. And then you see all the towers fire up because you can see all these things, and it's pretty crazy to watch. And then there's another video of it where it looks like you see the storm building, and then it's like these straight line winds or something just come in there. It's pretty crazy stuff. And that's not normal. And this guy's saying that, it may not necessarily be the cloud seeding, because apparently Texas is still running a big cloud seeding program. And in my mind, if that's even partly responsible, whether it's the governor down, whoever approved of this stuff, and whoever has responsibility and knew about it, and certainly the ones that went out and did it, they should be held criminally responsible for these deaths. I don't care what anybody says. That is a fact. If we are seeding the clouds and this happened as a result, somebody needs to be held responsible. And this guy said it's not just cloud seeding. He said it's something, what did he say? Upper atmospheric engineering, weather modification, something like that. So that's what he believes happened with this particular storm. And he's got several videos on that Facebook page if you want to go check it out yourself, folks.
Yeah. So the acronym for that is, thanks, Randy, is called HARP. and I can't remember what the acronym stands for. Jeff, do you remember high altitude atmospheric something? It's 2 A's in HARP.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember.
Okay. Maybe somebody can look that up. So HARP is spelled HAARP. There's 2 A's in it. So, and John, actually, before we move on to the next one here, will attest to the fact that we are one of the few states who have outlawed any weather modification whatsoever in Florida. And I'll tell you what's crazy. Since that happened, I have seen precisely one chemtrail. And there's an important distinction to be made here for the people who are, think this is conspiracy theory stuff. We've got a whole bunch of stuff lined up, but there's a big difference between a contrail and a chemtrail. So a contrail is what you see behind a jet, and it's essentially vaporized water, okay? And as the plane goes, the contrail follows it, but disappears relatively quickly, whereas chemtrails can stay in the sky for many, many hours after whatever the particulate is that was dropped. And essentially, when you put particulates in the air and you superheat them, they attract moisture, and that creates rain, and it falls, and that's how they intensify it. And as Jeff MD can state as an engineer, microwaves, what do they heat up, Jeff? Just one thing.
Well, they're usually tuned for water molecules.
Right.
That's why your microwave oven at home, your radar range heats your food, because it excites water molecules.
Yeah, and I could tell you we have a device that measures EMF and all sorts of cool stuff. And if you get anywhere near the gap in the door around a microwave, you'd be surprised at what's coming out of there. They say 40 volts per meter is safe. I've measured over 500 volts per meter. I've measured over 500 volts per meter off of our utility thing outside. If I say what it is, for sure we're getting a strike, because that's what we got last time. There's a whole lot of stuff out there, and it doesn't matter. You can argue whether it's ionizing and carcinogenic or not. Microwaves do what, Jeff? They cook, they superheat anything that's liquid, right?
Well, water, yeah. And the way it was discovered is that an engineer was walking in front of a radar and he had a candy bar in his pocket, and it melted in his pocket.
I did not know that.
That's where the idea for a microwave.
Trivia champion of the night.
That's right. That's right.
So we're going to get into more of this weather modification stuff, but John, check this out. 1987, church camp kids were taken by the Guadalupe River. 2025, it's happening again. Same river, same kind of camp. Nearly 40 years apart, same region, same kind of kids, same outcome. How is this even possible? And it's one of my favorite actors, Captain Kirk here. 3 minutes, 30 seconds. I'm just going to play the beginning just so you get the feel for it before John comments on it.
On Friday morning, July 17th, 1987, the small town of Temple, Texas, became the scene of a heroic rescue and tragic loss. Much of the footage you will see was taped on that day by the banks of the Guadalupe River.
It was the day they were supposed to go home. The more than 300 children at the church camp were awakened early. The river was flooded. If they didn't leave soon, their buses might not be able to leave at all.
They come in there rushing us up and everything. Telling us to get up, get packed and all this stuff. And I was asking why. They said we got to get out of here because the river was flowing over.
And we started going around the corner. We would go down the hill, then water started coming in the bus and stuff. We tried to back up, but then the bus got stuck, so they made all of us get out of the bus.
And that's whenever the first wave hit us and started scattering people to different trees.
Kids clinging onto the trees like ants, surrounded by rushing water.
Chris Ray was the first to be rescued.
So I'll go ahead and stop it there. John, as a former mayor and city controller, how does this happen? You guys have, departments that plan for this stuff, especially after it happens, to make sure it doesn't happen again. What do you think? Where was the breakdown? Or is this just straight up, mismanagement?
Well, I don't want to go so far as to call it mismanagement because I don't know all the facts. I will just tell you how it works here in Florida. And it's been this way through even some Democrat governors of Florida, because of our situation with hurricanes, has had to deal with a lot of stuff, maybe not at the same level at one time as this, but they will go back and analyze every single situation. And DeSantis has been great at it, by the way. But it goes back, even Jeb Bush was very good at that, one of the few things he was. But they analyze every situation, and they talk about the things that happened, what they could have done differently. They actually love input from people like myself, what happened in our community, what we saw, what we thought could have been done differently. They seem to take it very serious. So if they're not doing that in Texas, they need to be, because that institutional memory is really vital when it comes to dealing with disasters and that kind of stuff. And someone has to have that institutional memory. And Florida has this, they call it the FROC system now, that they put a lot of money and time into. And I was going through all that training when I left my position at the city of Hawthorne. But having that institutional memory, interviewing people, and realizing that if it's happened once, it definitely will happen again at some point. And you know, the one thing I wanted to say, because they're talking about, you know, these chemtrails and all this kind of stuff, weaponizing weather, because that's what's going to happen. You know, we'd like to think that, oh, we learned something and we're going to do it for the good of humanity. But history shows us that we usually use technology ultimately for nefarious type stuff, even microwave ovens and that kind of thing. And I was thinking about, while everybody was talking about the different possibilities out there, I was thinking about a line from Jurassic Park, that movie, where that Jeff Goldberg's character criticized him, saying, you did this because you could, but you never ask if you should. And that's something that I worry about, you know, when you start talking about playing with the God thing, so to speak, and whether if we can do it, we will do it, but we don't really ever ask, should we do it?
Yeah, good point, John. So Jeff, this next one's coming to you. And so just the text that goes with it, they're not just seeding the sky, they're launching weather control from the ground too. 42 cloud seeding projects, 200 more coming, 2.6 million from the feds. That was 2 years ago. There are 50 plus active operations across 9 states. And it's not just cloud seeding from planes. That's a ground-based cloud seeder. The flame coming out of it is sending tiny silver iodide particulates up into the sky. They're launching chemicals into the atmosphere from land and air. 30 million in funding, no oversight, no consent, should they? And they're not predicting the weather, they're manufacturing it. 1 minute, 43 seconds. I'll play most of this video.
There are currently 42 cloud seeding projects across.
By the way, message to YouTube's AI. This is from your buddies in Legacy Media. If you check it out in the bottom right corner, see that? ABC News. So if you give us a strike for it, you're striking your own allies in Legacy Media world.
The American West, like this one in Utah, where they take planes like this with flares attached. They fly right into the storm and send microscopic particles into the cloud. Particles that act like magnets for water droplets, bonding together until they are heavy enough to fall to the ground as rain or snow. At the University of Colorado, researchers are working on artificial intelligence to deploy cloud seeding drones.
And it's not just cloud seeding from the sky. There are hundreds of those things. That shack you see in the foreground is a ground-based cloud seeder. The little flame coming out is sending tiny silver iodide particles up into the sky. When a storm comes through, they go up to 2,000 feet above our head, into the storm, up those mountains, and make more snow than it naturally would.
While cloud seeding has been helping get every last drop out of some of the driest years on record, this past winter, Mother Nature came through. The Southern Rockies, which feed the Colorado River, got more than 4 times their average snow. But experts say it's still not enough.
As much as cloud seeding is a boost or a help, it's not a solution. The main solution is
conservation.
Cloud seeding is most successful in wet years, so this was a huge winter for them. They actually stopped early because Mother Nature was giving up so much. Now, studies have shown that the environmental impacts from the silver iodide, on the current scale, there are no impacts to snow or rain, also downstream, so it doesn't impact, the other weather. They do anticipate at least 200 more ground cloud seeders in the future, and the federal government has committed $2.6 million to seeding. Back to you, Gio and Eva.
So, Jeff, before you dissect what she had to say there, I have one quick question for you. Do the particulates that are released into the atmosphere attract water on their own, or do they have to be heated up to attract the moisture?
No, they can attract on their own. It's a very simple chemical, silver iodide.
Okay.
In fact, I think it may be like 1 silver, 2 iodine items hooked together. It's very simple. What it does is when it comes in contact, the water molecule adheres to the silver iodide, and then more attach, and then they fall out. Yeah, they've been cloud seeding about as long as they've had airplanes, and they cloud seeded in the 30s, trying to break the drought during the Great Depression and all that. They're getting better at it, obviously, now, but in the West, it's very common to seed because they need more water than we have, so they're always trying to get more. Where you don't need to seed is where you already have a buttload of water. I mean, if you're if you got a storm coming, you don't need to seed the clouds. They're going to rain anyway. So I don't understand the logic behind that. But if there was cloud seeding, it needs to be investigated to find out, okay, did someone cloud seed before this storm? If so, who? How effective was it? Did it work? And under whose authority was it done?
So there's a company, and we've got a slide coming up here shortly on it, that has a contract with the government of Texas specifically for doing cloud seeding, especially in areas that are suffering drought conditions, trying to get it to, help the crops. But on to the next one here. This will go to you, Randy. So 9 U.S. states are using cloud seeding to modify the weather right now. This isn't a conspiracy. It's official policy, and it's active. Note to YouTube, Facebook, AI. This is state-sponsored stuff. It's easy to verify and find. This is not conspiracy theory, misinformation, or disinformation. So right now, Texas, California, Utah, Colorado, Nevada, Idaho, Wyoming, New Mexico, and North Dakota are blasting chemicals into the sky to force rain, create snow, and suppress hail. It's called cloud seeding, and they're logging thousands of hours every year. Texas covers 30 million acres with weather modification. Utah seeds skies every winter without public input. California lets utility companies steer storms while towns flood and burn. No public vote, no national debate, just quiet control. This isn't about helping people. It's about controlling weather, water, and who gets both. So when your town floods or dries up, ask yourself, was it really just nature? So the blue areas here are targeted for cold season cloud seeding, and the green areas are warm season cloud seeding. And this is the North American Weather Modification Council. This is not just some crazy conspiracy theorist YouTube AI. Anyway, Randy, your thoughts on the potential for this to be used. I like how John said, they didn't ask, should they use this stuff? This seems like a pretty powerful weapon. And somebody did note in the comments, by the way, or the live chat, that we supposedly use this in Vietnam to try and make the battlefield, unfavorable to the Viet Cong. And I've read that before, so it's probably true. But Randy, your thoughts on this? Like you're on.
Yeah, I am. So in fact, we did. That was one of our most famous incidences of cloud seeding in Vietnam, and it was right before the monsoon season. So then biblical levels of flooding happened, and it was terrible. But yeah, we did that. And you look at all the winter ones, man. Well, it must be good for the snow and all the ski lifts and all the ski resorts. But if you look at Texas, and of course we do have a lot of, we're notorious for having droughts. And, in the last few years, I don't really remember them. They talk about a little bit late in the summer, but not like it used to be all the time. And I'm with John, it happened in 87, nowhere near this. It wasn't 30 and 40 feet, but it was still bad enough. So I don't know. I saw something the other day. Heck, I don't know why they didn't place horns down there, place those weather horns, just like for tornadoes. And then that river starts rising and coming down, man, those horns all the way down the river should be blowing loudly to wake everybody up, certainly during the summertime where, like on the 4th of July, where these camps are going to be packed because everybody's there for the holiday and to shoot some fireworks and to be down there on the river, in a nice spot. Same thing as Jeff said, and I said earlier, it needs to be investigated. There's a rumor that apparently 2 days before this storm, there was cloud seeding going on. And then I go back to the other guy, the Facebook page on Alaska Sky Watching, talking about that there was a lot more weather modification that went into this storm. And then he highlights the fact that microwaves that can either weaken or strengthen the storm. And I saw the video of all these 5G towers firing up. Why weren't they decreasing the storm? You can't say that it did, because that didn't happen. And a biblical level of flooding happened. I think they said, 3 trillion gallons of water, something like that. That's insane. And so if that's in fact, any of that happened, there needs to be an investigation. We need to get down to the bottom of it. And those that are responsible need to be held responsible. I don't care if you're going to use it to end a drought, but when it kills over 100 and now could be somewhere to 150, 200 people, what good were you doing?
Well, I would go so far as to say, if you live in Texas, you can vote in Texas, and you want to get to the bottom of this, elect Doc Pete. Doc Pete doesn't back away from any fight. And
I don't think people are happy with Abbott right now. Certainly with this thing, you look at even the border, he didn't do anything about it until it became election year. So he let at least 2 years go by where they just came in and didn't stop it.
So there's all kinds of rumors of Abbott and being hooked into the WEF, and he's been seeing a bunch of their events. But I mentioned that to Doc Pete before he decided to run, and he said, well, if I run, he said, I've got the receipts because I was in the room when this stuff happened. So expect some explosive stuff out of Doc Pete that'll show you where Abbott's actually been.
Well, good, because we have this Islamic problem now going on too, just like Michigan.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yes,
somebody needs to deal with that, all this stuff.
And if anybody's going to do it, it'll be Doc Pete. So
That's
moving on to the next one is for you, John. Texas cloud seeding CEO funded by Peter Thiel, connected to Palantir. So Peter Thiel was the co-founder of eBay with Elon Musk. So meet Augustus Dorico, a 25-year-old tech bro and Thiel fellow who founded the weather modification startup Rainmaker. According to publicly available info, Dorico's company was reportedly cloud seeding over parts of Texas just 2 days before historic flooding hit those same regions. He received $100,000 through Peter Thiel's fellowship, the same Thiel who co-founded Palantir, the surveillance and defense tech giant, tracking everything from troop movements to civilian behavior. Let that sink in. Why is a Palantir-connected billionaire funding private weather experiments in Texas? Why is a 25-year-old with no public oversight allowed to modify the sky? They call it stewarding the natural world. Texas got biblical flooding instead. This isn't a theory. It's documented, privately funded, and totally unregulated. It's publicly funded as well. No vote, no consent, no accountability. Just Thiel money, weather manipulation, and a flooded state left asking questions. And there's some sources here like Celia Farber, Substack, the Thiel Fellowship, and the Scientific American. Let me play part of this video. It's 6 minutes long, so I'm not going to play the whole thing. But this is the guy, Augustus Dorico. And he's speaking to the Florida legislature just before the legislature and then Ron DeSantis made it the law here in Florida that you are not allowed to engage in weather modification in the state of Florida. I'll play just enough of this that you get the gist of it. I'll tell you what, for 25 years old, though, whether this is one of the good guys or bad guys, I don't know, but he's extremely articulate and well-spoken.
My name is Augustus Dorico. I'm the CEO, founder of Rainmaker. We're a cloud seeding company that is enhancing precipitation via advanced radar and also drones for the sake of supplementing water supplies for farms, cities, reservoirs, and wildlife throughout the United States. Our ultimate vision is to end water scarcity, and we've begun that mission already. I'm testifying to not oppose the spirit of this bill, which I think is well-founded, but the current configuration of the bill that I think would impede this mission for ending water scarcity and also for bringing the best-in-class technology to Florida and the rest of the United States. And so the first point that I'd like to make is the difference between solar radiation management and cloud seeding. And so Senator Garcia did bring this up briefly. Solar radiation management is a very new technology. It's not something that's been tested at length. NOAA has done some very initial experiments on its efficacy. It is attempting to reduce the amount of solar radiation that makes it down to the planet by injecting reflective aerosols into the upper atmosphere. Once you inject these aerosols, they stay in the stratosphere for years. They have effects on the entire climate. The data from these experiments, because the experiments have been so few, is limited. And so the implications of them are not something that are well tested yet. Cloud seeding is altogether different. The only similarity is that it has to do with the atmosphere. It has to do with the low atmosphere. It's a mechanism, or it's a tool that either freezes the water in existing clouds or condenses the droplets in existing clouds into bigger snowflakes or bigger droplets such that they fall onto your target watershed or farm. It's a technology that has existed for 80 years in the United States. It was patented by GE in 1946, but it hasn't been viable for
1948. I actually have the patent, and I'll pull it up after just a little bit more of this video.
For a long time because we didn't have the appropriate radar to measure exactly what its effect is. I can tell you definitively that there is not cloud seeding going on in the state of Florida because you would be able to see its effect on radar. So the National Center for Atmospheric Research produced some great results from what's called the SNOWY campaign, where they were able to verify cloud seeding's effect. And they saw tens of millions of gallons of precipitation occur from each of their interventions. And that was very, very easily distinguishable on radar. It also is worth saying that it's local in its scope, and it is very short temporally. So if ever there is cloud seeding going on and you don't like the consequences of it, there are unintended consequences, and it's quite well characterized, so the unintended consequences are minimal. You can stop whenever you like. So that point of differentiation between solar radiation management, which is something that I think the public should scrutinize more heavily, and cloud seeding, is important to make from the top. Then the second.
So I'm going to go ahead and stop that there. He is very well spoken, but here's the patent that he was referring to. It was 1948, not 1946. And then I'm going to pass it off to you, John, for some comments. But U.S. patent 2,437,963, titled Methods and Apparatus for Producing Aerosols, was granted on March 16th, 1948 to inventors Vincent J. Schaefer and Irving Langmuir, assigned to General Electric Company. This patent describes techniques and equipment for generating aerosols with the applications including weather modification such as cloud seeding, though it's not exclusively limited to this purpose. So again, to the AI at YouTube, CommieTube, this is not conspiracy theory stuff we're making up. These are registered patents that have been around for a very long time. John, your thoughts first and foremost on our government here in Florida outlawing weather modification.
I think it was visionary to do that because, I mean, when I'm listening to that guy, and I used to be somewhat of a movie buff, as you could tell, I make references to that all the time. But that young guy, when he's explaining that, I don't know why, but I flashed to Frankenstein. When he's explaining why he does what he does. You know why? Because he can. He's doing it because he can, and they want to see it, And I think back to Independence Day. We just came off the 4th of July, right? And you remember in that, if you saw Independence Day, the guy that's at Area 51, he starts talking about, well, ever since the aliens came back, all this stuff is really working and it's cool. And of course, the president character says, people are dying out there, And so these, don't get me wrong. We need nerds. We need scientists. We need all that kind of stuff. But if we just turn them loose and they can do anything they want to do, the scariest thing about all that, really, when you go back to this patent you're talking about and all, is, I thought I was knowledgeable about this stuff, but they've been doing this since the 40s. What have they done that we don't know about? He says that the side effects are minimal, Well, I can see them probably saying that when they were developing the nuclear bomb, the side effects are kind of minimal.
Well, John, add this to your thought process. Bill Gates holds the patent to control hurricanes. Literally, the same guy warning you about climate disasters? ? He holds the patent to create, steer, strengthen, or weaken hurricanes on demand. U.S. patent number 20090289446 lists Gates as an inventor. His plan: use a fleet of ships to cool surface waters and manipulate storm paths. This isn't science fiction. It's documented weather engineering. They sell you fear, then they sell you the solution, and they own the damn storm. The same people screaming about climate emergencies hold the patents to make them happen. Welcome to weather warfare, patented, approved, and hidden in plain sight. So
yeah, it sounds like it sounds like a episode of a James Bond movie, if you think about it. You know, that this kind of stuff, and it's hard to I mean, the fiction and reality are blending here all the time, and that was when I was doing the notes for the show and looking at it. This part of it really. I'm glad you called on me, because it just amazed me that I'd like to think I'm someone who is knowledgeable about these things. I read a lot, I research a lot, but I have to admit that I was in the dark of how much this has been going on. There was a gentleman in Gainesville that was affiliated with the University of Florida. I wish I could remember his name. I think he's dead now. But he talked about chemtrails all the time. He even ran for local office, and he was talking about chemtrails all the time. And people just thought he was nuts, but including myself to a certain extent. But now I'm looking at it and going, you know, he was the one warning. You know, he was the canary in the coal mine. And so when I hear all that, I go back and we'll say it one more time. I hear this young guy. He's so articulate, and he is obviously brilliant. But he sounds like Frankenstein telling you why he invented the monster to me. And so somehow we the people have got to get a handle on this kind of thing, because the liberals, they say, oh, follow the science. You know, if they think that they could shoot something up and it would stop climate change, they would have done it yesterday, apparently.
Yeah, but John, when they say follow the science, that side isn't really meaning follow the science.
It means
yeah, I know. I'm just saying.
Follow what? Yeah. But you know, I've been saying
a lot of young people believe that, because that's why I keep coming back to the importance of shows like this, because they're getting educated. It's what did Reagan famously say about the liberals, that progressives and liberals, it's they know so much that it isn't so.
Yeah,
that's good.
Well, you know, as we've been talking about this for several years, as you know, Chris, and I've been for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been saying that to people, John. You got to realize the government, we have been studying weather and what to do about it and how to affect it since World War II, for 80 years. And they will still tell you up until recently that we haven't learned anything. And you know that can't be true, or we wouldn't still be spending money on it.
Well, that actually dovetails into, we're almost done. We've got like 2 topics left to cover, and Jeff will get the next couple slides here because they're on the same topic. So the United Arab Emirates has spent over $20 million on cloud seeding research, modifying the weather with over 1,000 hours of seeding every year. It's all controlled from a single building in Abu Dhabi. They don't predict the weather, they create it. And when unleashed it over Dubai, the city flooded. So I'm not going to play this video because we're running way long on time, but I'll move to the next tab here. So having record-breaking rainfall beyond recorded data, which started in about 1949, backs you up, Randy. Basically, for the most part, they noted that cloud seeding operations to induce rain have been used for years in the UAE. So, Jeff, I mean, you've spent more than your fair share of time in the Middle East. I don't know. Have you been to the United Arab Emirates and Dubai in particular?
Yeah, a few times.
So let's say no more. So what this is referring to, and I think you and I actually discussed this at one point in the past, that 2018 drought conditions in the Dubai area, the UAE did their cloud seeding and they overdid it and they flooded the city. So run with that ball, Jeff.
Well, yeah, the city, I mean, there are parts of the city are like 20 feet underwater. It was of biblical proportions, and it was a direct result of overseeding the clouds. But you got to realize Dubai is right on the Persian Gulf, so there's a lot of humidity. There's a lot of moisture in the air. You don't think of it, you think of it's a desert. There's a lot of moisture in the air right there, and it all fell out.
And yeah, I wasn't going to play this video anyway, but it seems like it's struggling. But that's Dubai in 2018 after they did the cloud seeding. So I would assume that these drive unders here are probably at least 10 feet high, probably to this line right here where my cursor is. So pretty significant amount of money. So the last part here, and I'll give all three of you a chance to speak to this, but it's pretty disturbing. So I've got two stories pulled up here. I'm going to go through both of them, and then I'll let you all speak to it. So the first one, New York Post, pediatrician fired for vile post suggesting Texas flood victims were Trump supporters who got what they voted for. And this was just published this morning, by the way. So a pediatrician has been fired over a vile post suggesting that more than 80 killed in the horrific Texas floods, over 100 now, including dozens of kids, were President Trump supporters who got what they voted for. Dr. Christina B. Propst drew widespread scorn following the disparaging, since deleted post under her old Facebook username, Christina, according to MediaType. May all visitors, children, non-MAGA voters, and pets be safe and dry, Propst wrote in the now viral post. And there we go. Kerr County MAGA voted to gut FEMA. They deny climate change. May they get what they voted for. Bless their hearts. The Facebook post quickly went viral after a screenshot was shared by libs of TikTok. Propst's employer, Bluefish Pediatrics, initially said the employee had been suspended before announcing that the individual is no longer employed there. As we previously mentioned in our original statement, we strongly condemn the comments that were made in that post. That post does not reflect the value, standards, or mission of Bluefish Pediatrics, the company said. We do not support or condone any statement that politicizes tragedy, diminishes human dignity, or fails to clearly uphold compassion for every child and family, regardless of background or beliefs, the doctor's office added. And then it goes on to note how she was fired. She was let go. Before I do the next one, I want you all to see this right here. Do you see in between the word suspended and before that big long dash there? That is a dead giveaway without copying and pasting this article and dropping it on an AI and asking if it was AI generated. That is 100%. I've never come across it without being 100% AI generated. You see a long dash as a sentence separator these days in any writing from anybody. It was generated by AI, period, full stop. And
not 100%. My wife uses M dashes all the time when she edits my books.
99.999999%.
So she's a grammar Nazi, right? That's what you're telling us, Jeff. Because you're right. Because I use a.
We had a little bit of feedback.
Yeah, I don't know why it keeps doing that. I think my neighbor's running some sort of frequency because it just started today. Anyway, I use a grammar app that does do that. But in all fairness, now it does say generated with AI, but before AI, it did not have that, and it still gave me the long dashes.
That long dash is a pretty good giveaway. That anyway.
My last thing on it, that lady was a pediatric. You know, the company she worked for, they contract out to the Houston Independent School District. So she was a pediatrician that worked for the Houston Independent School District through that company, and she put out that kind of stuff.
So I got one more article, then I'll go Jeff, Randy, John to comment on this stuff, and then we're conflicted question. We're in the home stretch, but somebody just made a really good comment here. Like this one. I mean, this is one of our most loyal followers here, Dano. You know, it must be really hard life being that stupid. Her cornbread isn't done in the middle.
That's right.
I don't know about y'all, but I'm hearing John Martin say that.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to make a comment about the dash actually, because I've always heard, because I got friends that are in the funeral home business, that it says, you know, you're born here, died here. Yeah. The dash is you.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's your life. That's right.
That's your life, the dash.
That's too funny. So here's another disgusting article. You know, I haven't seen, for example, when the catastrophe hits a blue state or a blue city, I've seen very little instances of anybody who could be considered a conservative Christian American say anything, but they hope for the best. Whereas, you know, the liberals and rhinos have a really bad habit of they have no morals to speak of whatsoever. So wrong message, wrong timing. Houston mayoral appointee Sade Perkins fired over inappropriate Camp Mystic flood comments. A Houston mayoral appointee went ballistic by criticizing a Texas campsite where 7 little girls perished in floodwaters, then blaming Donald Trump for the tragedy. In a series of cruel videos, Sade Perkins vented her frustrations, calling Camp Mystic whites only Christian camp hours after a heavy deluge ripped through in Hunt on the 4th of July. I know I'm going to get canceled for this, but Camp Mystic is a white only girls Christian camp. She raged on TikTok as girls were still missing. They don't even have a token Asian. They don't have a token black person. It's all white only conservative Christian camp. Perkins was admonished by Houston Mayor John Whitmore, who said he would take steps to remove her from the board. However, she doubled down by blaming Trump, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick in the tragedy, describing it as totally preventable. She complained she had become the scapegoat to cover for the F up of flood, instead arguing the reason for the natural disaster was, of course, your friendly MAGA Trump up there in the White House. And there's just a little bit more at the end here. I did not cause the flood, nor did I cause the failure from the National Weather Service and FEMA, which we've already debunked at the beginning of this episode. That just flat out didn't happen. It's fake news. Those were done by design, said the lieutenant. And by the way, Governor and your effing president, she said. Perkins was admonished by Mayor Whitmore, who issued a statement apologizing for the horrifying comments as the death toll rose to 82, including 23 children and 7 girls from the summer camp. The comments shared on social media are deeply inappropriate and have no place in a decent society, especially as families grieve the confirmed deaths and the ongoing search for the missing, Whitmire said. The individual who made these statements is not a City of Houston employee. She was appointed to the city's Food Insecurity Board by former Mayor Sylvester Turner in 2024, and her term expired in January 2025. Whitmire said steps were being taken immediately to remove her permanently from the board and vowed he has no plans to reappoint her. But Perkins had no regrets after being publicly scolded by the mayor on Sunday, instead doubling down on her extraordinary attack on the camp. You people are effing crazy. You people are insane, she said of her critics. And the video is still up, and I still stand behind 10 toes down on the mother effer ground. That shit is racism and white supremacy, period. If it was Hispanic kids, if it was alphabet kids that got swept away, y'all wouldn't give a F. And the same mega people would be saying they deserved it and that it's God's will. So F all y'all. Addressing Mayor Whitmer's comments head on, Perkins said Mayor Whitmire is a piece of shit. Jeff, what on earth has happened to our society?
Well, I mean, these are the same people I said there's a special place in hell for them. There's going to be more of them.
True story. Randy, you want to make any comments on this, and then John?
Yeah, so I will, because I made a post on that video earlier on Facebook. You know, and until we start calling it what it is, and I'm also calling on the black community, right? Because that is a racist making racist comments and spreading race hate. And the fact is, you cannot beat racism with more racism. And so until all of us, including the black community, when it's a black person saying it, calling it out for racism, it's not going to stop. The people that have hate in their heart are going to spread this kind of stuff. And I don't, some people will say that black people can't be racist. That just isn't true. There's racists on both sides of the fence, and they are the problem when it comes to that topic.
Yeah, true story. But their response would be, is you can't be racist against whites. Jeff, go ahead.
Well, you say I've got to bail out because I got in-laws coming over in about 2 minutes.
Okay. We're fixed to wrap up here, but thanks, Jeff. Everybody in the audience.
All right, everybody have a good night.
We got about 5 minutes left. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate your insight as usual. John, your comments on these brutal, man.
It's just it's terrible. But she's talking about these Christian kids and all. And you know what? We were talking about terrorists at the beginning of the show, and you mentioned Africa, and I didn't really get a chance to bring it up, so I'm gonna bring it up now. You know, the story that got almost zero coverage in the mainstream media, just a little blurb, didn't 200 Christians basically black Christians just get beheaded in Africa this past week? Like
Nigeria.
200 and something?
Nigeria. It's a regular occurrence.
So, I mean, so what is that? To me, it's tragic. And that they didn't even really cover that. Black Christians getting killed in Africa. But, think about the big, beautiful bill, okay, that just passed. The Democrats, and of course, Ocasio-Cortez was leading the way, but of course, Hakeem Jeffries, I mean, they call people who support Trump everything but the child of God. So now they're saying they're, God, whatever, but we're deplorables, basket of deplorables, garbage, and now AOC comes out and said that the Republicans and the people that support MAGA have made a deal with who? The devil. The devil. So, when you demean people and paint 70, almost 80 million people that voted for Donald Trump of many different races, creeds, and colors, obviously, if they're either Nazis, fascists, garbage, deplorable sounds pretty good at this point. But now we're spawn of the devil. So sure, anything goes. You can say anything about that, right? And so the mainstream media is guilty as anything. And the political leaders, you've got political leaders like Ocasio-Cortez saying this. What is some lowly appointee who's bitter about something in life going to say when the people they look up to didn't Crockett from Texas just say?
Oh, yeah.
What did she just say about people? That everybody who supported Trump was sick.
Yeah.
Sick, mentally ill. And she's supposedly a leader in Texas, of all places, for God's sake. So I'm not shocked this woman would say that, because everybody she looks up to is saying that. It's not just wackos. It's the mainstream of the Democratic progressive movement. And I tell Democrats all the time out there, because I used to be one, for God's sake, you don't have to become a MAGA supporter. You don't have to become a Republican. I did by choice. But if you're going to stay in the Democratic Party and the progressives, take that party back over. Because right now, the Ocasio-Cortezes and this lady is saying that's who's running the party. And that's the message that's getting out. And so I'm not surprised at all.
Are we going to stay friends with John, since he just told us he was a Democrat at some point in time? I mean, what's the verdict on this?
Hey, I will say he's one with some sense, because I was just thinking he's right. I've been saying since 2014, and Donald Trump started running and they all went against him. I'm like, listen, and the Me Too movement and all these other little things that pop up and they don't really mean anything, and they go away next year and you don't ever hear about them again. I said, you know how you can tell the hypocrisy of the liberals? Because look at what's going on in Africa. And again, this was 2014, but I've been saying it ever since. And they don't say a word. So if you really believe what they say they believe, you don't pick and choose the stories. You believe it, so you go with it no matter who it is. But again, you look at what's going on in Africa, even now, whether it's the white farmers or these Christians that just got beheaded, and they don't say a word because they don't care. Nobody cares about Africa.
Yeah, it's ongoing as far as the persecution of Christians in Africa is concerned. Yep. There's no good news from it at all. I want to give a shout out to our friend Roger Moore. He's one of our most active followers in the Signal chat. So when you sign up as a Guardian, you just send an email to support@survivaldispatch.com with your phone number, and we send you an invite to the chat. So Roger put this one in earlier today, and I want to give him a shout out for it. We're running tight on time, so I'm not going to play the video, but I put the link to it. I think I got it into all of the chats, and it's pretty inspirational stuff. True miracle. Man saves woman after treading floodwaters for more than 20 miles. I mean, talk about, perseverance and the will to survive. What an amazing example. So anyway, the link should be in your live chat. Y'all can watch that. But we're at the end here, so I just want to say a couple things as far as a quick recap. So we started with the daily terrorism SITREP situation report. And as far as the DHS is concerned, the FBI and other agencies were still in a code red, call it critical condition, both globally as well as in America, with multiple terrorist incidents happening every single day. We covered a couple of them that happened in the past 48 hours, which was Hamas, attacking U.S. aid workers in Gaza, and Houthi rebels striking a commercial vessel in the Red Sea. That's not going to change anytime soon. Go to thereligionofpeace.com. Check out the ticker on the side for how many terrorist incidents there have been since 9/11. It's 45, 46, 47,000, something along those lines. And then, of course, the main topic tonight has been this catastrophic flooding in Texas. I don't know if John's going to cover that tomorrow night or not, but I do expect that we're going to circle back on this topic at some point in time when we have more definitive conclusions on the weather manipulation / weather modification stuff to see exactly what happened in that regard. And we are now down to the conflicted question of the night. And here it is. Unfortunately, we won't get Jeff MD's answer tonight, but the three of us will do the best we can. Your scouts inform you about a small kidnapper who is holding people hostage and engaging in human trafficking. The initial intel is that he has a force of 4 other men with him who are well armed and dozens of victims, most of them women and children. Sounds like they would be an even match to your current survival group and your capabilities. As your group's leader, would you waste supplies and risk the lives of your group members to rid the world of such characters, or would you let them continue to prey upon the weak? Randy, I'll go to you first. I think you're on mute, Randy.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No
All
problem.
right. So I think, it says small-time kidnapper. It mentions that, it's comparable to the size that we have and our capabilities. Well, Jeff's not on here, so he can't back me up, but here's reality. Even if you had a smaller force, right, use the right terrain, the right planning, and the right tactics, the element of surprise and violence of action, and you can use a very small force to take down and overwhelm a very large force. It's no different than Thermopylae, right? It's the same concept. So that's exactly what I would do. I would gather some more intel on them first. Who are they feeding these to, and what does that element look like? And how upset are they going to be if this guy disappears? If you can find that kind of intel. But then I'm going to make sure that we capture, we come in and when we actually move on them, it will be at the right terrain, at the right spot, at the right time. And we will use the right tactics, and I have no doubt remove this scumbag from the planet Earth.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Randy. Just before I go to John, I'll just quickly say, if this was my survival group, we have all kinds of long-range weapons that are very, very accurate, like 338 Lapuas. And if you let these guys continue to get away with what they're doing, I don't think that puts you on strong moral ground. I would question your values and your morals. But the other part to it is, if these people are willing to traffic individuals like that, what happens if they attack you when you don't expect it? Because as you said, Randy, the element of surprise is everything. I would go with Randy's thoughts 100%. I would want to know who's buying these human victims from them. And the next thing is, we would be setting up a long distance action with some close assets as well. And we would take these guys out and they wouldn't even know what hit them. End of story. John, your thoughts on letting this?
Well, I just want to add one last thing before
Sure.
John goes.
Go ahead.
And he would probably know this too, because you let them go, right? Elements like this don't usually get weaker if they're successful. They get stronger and bigger, and then you won't be able to deal with them. That's
right. No, good point. Yeah, well, because they're going to be making something from the transactions, right? So, John, your thoughts?
Well, I was thinking of some famous lines as well. That what is it? The saying I think that Martin Luther King actually said about that the times will not be judged by the evil that men do, but by the good people who stand by and do nothing. And I was also thinking about the great Mel Gibson: aim small, miss small, aim big, hit big. So yeah, I totally agree that with what Randy was saying. If you have a group of people that are marauding and doing this kind of thing, they're eventually going to come for you at some point. And I agree, Chris, what you said, that they get bigger rather than smaller if you continue to let it happen. And if we are headed towards times like we talk a lot about on the show, I think it's going to be more important than ever for good people to identify. I had an experience, and I won't get into details this weekend, but it involved a jackpot on a fishing thing, and somebody cheated on it, and I caught them, and it didn't have anything to do with me, but I told the truth, and it got straightened out. And there was a group of people standing around me while I was cleaning my fish saying, that guy should have minded his own business. They were saying it loud enough where I could hear. And I would have kept the money. And there's 4 or 5 guys. And I said, so you would have kept the money? And he said, yeah. And I went down the line and I asked him, I said, that's exactly what's wrong with this country right now. Because you either have integrity or you don't. There's not really a gray area there. And so in this situation, you're either going to stand up for what's right and protect the weak, or you're not. And if you believe in spiritual, if you're a Christian person, then you're going to get your reward anyway. So I would go to somebody like Randy and Chris, and I'd say, hey guys, I've seen this. What should we do? And I would listen to what and I would aim big.
There you go. So I just want to answer a question from the audience here. No option to call SWAT. So the conflicted series of questions and card decks are set in a post-apocalyptic scenario. So the society is completely broken down. Conflictedthegame.com. And if you have a look at the links down below, I'm pretty sure we've got a code that you get something like free shipping or 10% off or something like that. We don't get paid an affiliate commission on that either, by the way. They're friends of ours. They've got, I want to say, 14 card decks out with different scenarios. And we've been doing this for a couple of years now. It's good for audience engagement. Of course, we want to hear everybody's answers. Live chat, comments down below, or on our Substack would be fine as well. So I think that's pretty much it. Just a quick reminder, go to survivaldispatchnews.com, sign up for a free Substack account. You'll get our Saturday watch guide, which lists everything we publish for the week. We know that most of you are not getting notifications from big platforms like CommieTube, and that's the biggest way they suppress people like us. So if you go sign up for the free account, you'll get more than just the Saturday watch guide, but you'll have links to everything that we publish. There's a description, you see the thumbnail, et cetera, I want to thank everybody who's a paying guardian, as well as our supporters, our vendors who advertise with us, which would include CCW Safe and Carnival. We've been getting to know these guys at Carnival pretty well. These are awesome American guys, 100% American meat, 100% mRNA free, 100% antibiotic free, 100% grass finished, not just grass fed. Grass fed means the last few weeks of an animal's life, they bulk it up with grains and they get all the bad crap in them anyway. Randy and I are both addicted to this stuff now. So they've got beef, chicken, and pork, and it's freeze dried, 25-year shelf life. My wife eats 100% carnivore. This is an amazing product. You reconstitute it with water or a marinade, or you throw it in your crock pot. And because it's freeze dried, it sucks up every last bit of flavor. This is a pretty incredible product, number one. Number two, after it's reconstituted, I throw it in the air fryer for 4 minutes at 400 degrees, and it comes out medium rare. And it's amazing. They also have dog treats coming, by the way, from the offcuts from these things. And they're called Moochables, or at least they're contemplating the name Moochables. I don't know if you want to say anything about the Carnival, Randy, but I really like this product.
Well, I think it's very easy, and it's just plain good. It's just good, and it's very easy to deal with, And then if you're using it for trail packing, that bag is only 6 ounces. Now, once you put the water to it, it turns into 1.5 pounds of meat.
That's right.
But freeze dried, it's only 6 ounces, so it's very light, and it's very good. I don't know what else to say.
So here's a question from Aaron. So we have memberships. We do them on Substack. YouTube is a bunch of commies, and they've given us stripes when we've told the truth on multiple topics. I am not putting my business under YouTube's auspices, number one. Number two, they take over 30% of the memberships. Substack, on the other hand, takes 10% with zero censorship. So anybody who would like to support us, it's much appreciated, because if we didn't have vendors like Carnival and CCW Safe, Compliant Technologies, etc., plus our Guardian members who pay $7.99 a month or $75 a year, you get 2.5 months for free. We would be punching time clocks so that we could put food on the table because we have bills too. But because of the Guardian memberships and our sponsors, gives us the ability to work literally 7 days a week to bring you all the truth. And if you want to support us, please go to survivaldispatchnews.com. That's our Substack. Sign up there. And you know what? I think that's pretty much it. Other than I do want to mention, there's a coupon code, and we're not affiliates with these guys, okay? They help us with a monthly stipend to defer our costs. So whether you use the coupon or not doesn't make any difference to us. It does to them. Eat meat. All one word. Eat meat. You get 10% off. I haven't talked to a single person who's bought this who hasn't gone, wow, what an awesome product. So that's it for that. Tomorrow night, John will be back. Before you leave, please mash the like button, leave a comment. Anything to help the algorithm out a little bit would be much appreciated. We're going to be back on Wednesday evening with General Paul Vallely, former Army Ranger, first Spec Ops soldier ever to be elevated to the level of a general. He's an American legend. And we're going to have James Botter on with him. James is the trucker who organized the Canadian trucker convoy a few years ago. And he's hiding out here in America because the Canadian government essentially wants to lock him up for life because God forbid that they spoke out against the Canadian government's COVID tyranny. And he's applied for political asylum here in America, and the general is helping him. So that's going to be a pretty explosive episode. And once again, we'll be flirting with a strike. And if you don't see us on YouTube tomorrow night, come find us on our Substack. There's a good chance that the weather modification stuff from tonight may get us another strike. But that's it. We've got a 10-minute video tonight for those of you who are interested. It's a really good video to wrap up this episode. But I'll be back Wednesday night. Randy will be back with me Wednesday night. John will be back sometime in the near future. But between now and then, please like, share, comment, subscribe. God bless America.
God bless America.
And enjoy the very long closing video.
Attention all you rule breakers, you misfits and troublemakers, all you free spirits and pioneers, all you visionaries and nonconformists. Everything the establishment has told you is wrong with you is actually what's right with you. You see things others don't. You are hardwired to change the world. Unlike 9 out of 10 people, your mind is irrepressible, and this threatens authority. You were born to be a revolutionary. You can't stand rules because in your heart you know there's a better way. You have strengths dangerous to the establishment, and it wants them eliminated. So your whole life you've been told your strengths were weaknesses. Now I'm telling you otherwise. Your impulsivity is a gift. Impulses are your key to the miraculous. Your distractibility is an artifact of your inspired creativity. Your mood swings reflect the natural pulse of life. They give you unstoppable energy when you're high, and deep soulful insight when you're low. Been diagnosed with a disorder? That's society's latest way to deny its own illness by pointing the finger at you. Your addictive personality is just a symptom of your vast, underused capacity for heroic creative expression and spiritual connection. Your utter lack of repression, your wide-eyed idealism, your unmitigated open mind. Didn't anyone ever tell you? These are the traits shared by the greatest pioneers and visionaries, innovators, revolutionaries, procrastinators, and drama queens, activists on the social scene, space cadets, and mavericks, philosophers, and derelicts, business suits flying fighter jets, football stars and sex addicts, celebrities with ADD, alcoholics who seek novelty, first responders, prophets and saints, mystics, and change agents. We are all the same, you know, 'cause we're all affected by the way. We are all the same, you know, 'cause we're all attracted to the flame. You know in your heart there's a natural order, something more sovereign than any man-made rules or laws could ever substrate of the cosmos. It guides the very current of time and space. The way is known by some as the will of God, divine providence, the Holy Spirit, the implicate order, the Tao, reverse entropy, light force. But for now, we'll simply call it the way. The way is reflected in you as the source of your inspiration, the source of your passions, your wisdom, your enthusiasm, your intuition, your spiritual fire, love. The way takes the chaos out of the universe and breathes life into it, giving it divine order. The way, when expressed by the mind, is genius. When perceived through the eyes, is beauty. When felt through the senses, is grace. When allowed into the heart, is love. Most people cannot sense the way directly, but then there are the wayseers, the keepers of the flame. Wayseers have an unexplainable knack for just knowing the way. They sense it in their very being. They can't tell you why or how they arrived at the right answer. They just know it in their core. They can't show their work, so don't ask. Their minds simply resonate with the way. When the way is present, so are they. Are blind to it, and society begs you to ignore it. The way stirs you inside. Neurological repression blocks most people's awareness of the way. Censoring all thoughts and impulses from the unconscious is their prefrontal cortex, the Gestapo of the brain. Nothing which violates its socialized programming even gets through. But your mind is different. Your mind has been cracked wide open to the way by some miraculous genetic trait, some psychotropic chemical, or maybe even by the will of your own soul. Your brain's reward pathways have been hijacked. Dopamine employed to overthrow the fascist dictatorship of your prefrontal cortex. Now your brain is free of repression. Your mind free of censorship. Your awareness exposed to the turbulent seas of the unconscious. Through this open doorway, divine light shines into your consciousness, showing you the way. This is what makes you a wayseer. 90% of human civilization is populated with those whose brains are blocked to the way. Their brains are hardwired to enforce the social programming indoctrinated since birth. Unlike you, they cannot break out of this programming because they have not yet experienced the necessary revolution of mind. These programmed people take social institutions and rules very seriously. Society is full of games programmed to keep people's minds occupied so they will not revolt. These games often cause sick fixations on peculiar protocols, power structures, taboos, and domination, all subtle forms of human bondage. This distinct form of madness is not only tolerated by the masses, but insisted upon. The programmed ones believe in rules so forcefully, they become willing to destroy anyone who violates them. Wayseers are the ones who call their bluff. Since wayseer minds are free to reject social programming, wayseers readily see these social institutions for what they are, imaginary games. Wayseers comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. Helping those who are lost in these games and refuse to help themselves is the calling of many wayseers. Since wayseers are the ones who keep contact with the original source of reality, they are able to disrupt societal conventions and even governments to realign humanity with the way. The wayseers are an ancient lineage, a kind of priesthood, carriers of the flame, ones in the know. There must always be wayseers to reform the dizzying, psychotic, spinning wheels of society